Thank you so much, Sam. During my 7 minutes, I'd like to start by inviting you, if any part of what I'm saying sounds remotely familiar, just to wave your hand. I can't actually see you very well, but that's my invitation. And this is the title of my talk. Usually I have 40 minutes to give it. I'm doing it in 7. I understand Sam runs you over with his wheelchair if you go over. A few years ago, my husband David and I were walking across the parking lot of St. Patrick's Basilica Church in Montreal. A TV crew approached us and wanted to know whether or not, given that the Pope had just died, would we care to comment. I said, no, I don't think so, and kept walking. David, from behind me, said, even though he hadn't been to church in 40 years, sure, I'll comment. Are there a few waves here? I turned around in astonishment to watch him solemnly declare, it's a sad day for Catholics everywhere. And I thought, well, duh. And then I thought, yeah, but wouldn't it be great if the next Pope came up with a progressive policy on contraception that would not disenfranchise the lives of millions of women around the world? But I had turned down the interview, so no one heard my provocative comments. It turns out I'm not alone. Women often decline to offer their opinion, even when they're certified experts in the field. As a result, on op-ed pages, on talk shows across this country, women's views are outnumbered by men's by a ratio of about 4 or 5 to 1. And I ask you, does this make sense? Does it make sense to allow the analysis of intractable, complex problems to be left only to the portion of the population who are unable to ask for directions? Okay, you're eating up my 7 minutes. In addition to making up more than half of the population, women have achieved senior levels in many arenas, in most arenas, and are now 60% of university grads. And because we see and experience the world differently often than men do, our perspectives are often different. And they're missing, and that's a problem. So I'm going to focus on the top reasons smart women need to speak up more often. Number 1, to counter persistent and often unconscious sexism. When I saw this headline in the Vancouver Sun a few years ago, I thought the story was about the fact that men still earn on average more than women. But when I read the article, what it was actually about was that women's unpaid labor, when you count it all up, in the home, in the community, makes up for about 40% of Canada's GDP. And if I'd written the headline, I think I'd have mentioned that. The male headline writer didn't intend to denigrate women's contribution. He just framed the story from his own perspective. And that has an impact on what news gets covered and how. Which brings us to reason number 2. Because most women spend much of their lives either avoiding or getting pregnant and then dealing with the consequences, we often have different priorities than men. And I've noticed that when women do take the time to speak up, they often focus on those priorities. In the past year, I have trained hundreds of women to translate their expertise into written commentary, and I've noticed that when they write and speak up, they've chosen to focus on things ranging from elder abuse and toxic chemicals to sexual consent and the family tax credit. Which leads us to reason number 3. Women don't have a monopoly on making the world a better place. Lots of men are engaged in this work. But because many women still experience barriers, inequities, and exploitation, their voices are needed to help challenge injustice. A few years ago, I was invited onto CBC TV to debate the dubious merits of a beer ad. It featured, here's a shocker, voyeuristic camera shots of underclad women in a bar. I gave a predictable critique about the damage done when women are sexualized and how often alcohol is implicated in date rape. In response to my interview, I received an email from Jennifer, a young artist who wrote me to express her heartfelt gratitude. Jennifer had been gang raped at a party at the age of 17. Lots of alcohol was involved, and she told me in her email that every time she saw an ad like the beer ad or the one on the screen that sexualized women and implied that violence was a natural, expected part of sex, she relived the gang rape. And she said she would never be able to go on television and say what I had because of that. But she felt empowered to hear me speaking her truth. So that's reason number 4, to provide a voice for those who can't speak for themselves. Although I passed up the chance to comment on the Pope's death, I in fact owe my entire career to commenting on the demise of the Miss Canada pageant. In 1990, as an underemployed grad student, I did an interview with BCTV about the pageant's cancellation. And because I had more to say than the 10 seconds they gave me, I then wrote a newspaper commentary about it. As a result, I got invitations to speak, to be on the radio, to produce a TV series, my profile read to a newspaper column, a job in the Premier's office, a couple of book contracts. My influence expanded exponentially as a result of my profile. I learned that people are more likely to return your calls, give your cause money, and help you change the world when you have a public voice. Some of you may recall that during the 1993 election, Kim Campbell was accused of being ambitious, like that was a bad thing. She recently delivered the following message to women. She said, look, power exists. Someone has to exercise it. Why not you? So here's the thing. Women need to speak up because we all benefit from a greater diversity of voices. A growing body of research makes clear when companies include women at the top, they're more ethical and competitive. Countries that educate women and make use of their talents, the quality of life improves for everyone. Informed Opinions, the nonprofit project that I started 2 years ago, trains and motivates women to speak up. We're building women's leadership capacity and making them easier for journalists to find. So, even if you're not a smart woman who should be speaking up more often, and clearly many of you are, you can play a role by encouraging the media you consume to better reflect the audiences that they serve by featuring more fully clothed female role models. Thank you very much.